You're welcome to Healthtitude, a health enlightenment program on Anambra Broadcasting Service Television here in Oka. Today on the program, we'll be looking at the malaria vaccine, a new development in the health sector. And in the studio, I have Dr. Simeon Onyemechi. Dr. Simeon Onyemechi is the Managing Director, CEO, Anambra State Health Insurance Scheme. Good to have you in the studio.
Good to have you too.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Now, the Nigerian government approved a new malaria vaccine from Oxford University, becoming the second country after Ghana in the world to grant such approval. And we all know that before now, Nigeria nation has been ravaged by malaria over the years. And doctor in the studio, you will agree with me that in the time of COVID-19, a lot of people were of the opinion that the vaccine came out much earlier than malaria, that we've been battling malaria over the years. But now they had to come up with COVID vaccine. But people said that they would have done something about malaria vaccine before COVID-19. So when you got the news that finally malaria vaccine is out, what was your feeling?
Oh, well, it was a eureka moment for the health sector globally, because when we look at the sheer burden of malaria in the tropical African countries, but when we even narrow it down home in Nigeria, and we look at global and then Nigeria, all over the world we have over 100 million cases of malaria per annum. This was latest data for the year 2022. And we had over 600,000 deaths from malaria in that year 2022 alone, World Health Organization data. Then we bring it down home. Nigeria as a country accounted for 31.3% of that, about 619,000 deaths, meaning that Nigeria accounted for somewhere close to 200,000 deaths from malaria alone in the year 2022. When we put health data in perspective, if you have never been affected, it just sounds like numbers. But having 200,000 people die in Nigeria is equivalent to having one Boeing 747 crashing on Nigerian soil every day in the year 2022. But because these individuals are mainly poor, vulnerable people, especially the age group that is most at risk, which is under 5 age range, these are children who cannot speak for themselves. They can't advocate for themselves. So they are the base of the vulnerability of our population. Now, when you have people in that age group, that vulnerable, about the size of a field Boeing 747 dying every day on Nigerian soil in 1 year, then it makes sense if we talk about what a relief it is to have malaria vaccine finally with us. It was a very rapid one with COVID-19. Yes, I understand the sentiments, but that is a viral infection. Just like we have flu shots given overseas and even in Nigeria and in some other countries around the world every year, when you have the genetic drift and genetic shifts, you have that, yes, a new virus strain comes on board, especially with the respiratory viruses, you know, the automyxoviridae. Well, let's not get into the virological details. Now, those families of viral diseases, you have that generally you have mutations, and then the world can predict that, oh, we will have this kind of shift in the genetic code of these viruses. So let us pretest different vaccines and keep And then as we get any of those kind of genetic shifts and drifts, then we'll begin to try which of the vaccines will hit it most effectively, because these are seasonal things that happen generally. But then you now have malaria being endemic in Africa, accounting for several deaths in thousands, and over the years in several millions. But this is a protozoal disease, not a viral, neither is it a bacterial infection. So the dynamics of the microbiology of protozoa parasites is actually quite different from what you have for viruses. And then because if it was that easy even for all families of viruses, why don't we have vaccines for HIV coming out much longer than this time?
Oh, okay.
So those kind of dynamics. But finally, we thank God that we are where we are today, and we can heave a sigh of relief.
Okay, yeah. A great relief, you say, that's the feeling. Okay, of course, everybody in Nigeria, we are so happy that the vaccine is out. But on going through some reports, I found out that this vaccine will be targeted at children between the ages of 5 months and 36 months of age. Now, why is it so? Because in Nigeria, mosquito bites all of us, and most of us fall sick of malaria. Why is it so?
You have that the age group that is most at risk is the under 5. Okay. Now, among the under 5, you now have even the most critically at risk, which is the age group 6 months to 36 months. Now, a child, when a child is born in this part of the world, we have some level of protection from our parents. When we take the breast milk and what have you, the antibodies that are transferred to a child through the colostrum, which is the first milk, up until the regular breast milk that the child takes, you have some level of exposure when the mother is also having to go through antenatal, and then the mother has taken some prophylaxis for malaria. You have all manner of things around when a child is in utero that will give some level of immunity, not only to malaria, but to several other diseases. And these things begin to wane as the child is born, not precluding the fact that, yes, we have cases of neonatal malaria. You have people who will be born, early neonatal. The child is born today, congenital malaria, I beg your pardon, not neonatal, I mean congenital malaria. A child is born and comes out from the womb with malaria. We have those cases, especially in women who do not take their prophylaxis very seriously and what have you. Now, when you have a mother take the prophylaxis during pregnancy very seriously, or had cause to treat malaria in pregnancy and what have you, there is a communication between the child in the womb and the mother through the placenta. There's a lot of exposure, which is the reason you say certain drugs a woman who is pregnant shouldn't take, or a nursing mother, because of the communications through the placenta, the transfers, and then through the breast milk to the child. At that early stages, you have that some level of immunity the child has. Now, and then for most for most children, when they are born, you find out that mothers may tend to keep them under insecticide-treated nets in the early stages. The first few months of life, you find mothers putting children under bed, and then after a while, they now begin to tell you, oh, the child is cranky when we put under the net, and they start bringing them out. And at that stage, they now start getting beaten by mosquitoes. But just to say that, looking again at the immunity of the child between that critical age, 6 months to 36, they are most at risk of mortality from malaria. If you take it comparatively with the initial opening with COVID-19, when COVID-19 vaccine came out, we targeted the most at-risk population: elderly people, people who had comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, cardiac diseases, people who were in the front line, healthcare workers, and all of that. Remember, there was an inclusion criteria when COVID vaccine came out, because at that time we didn't have enough globally. There was this rationing, for logistics challenges. The same thing is happening at this time. Let us protect the most at risk children in that age group, and over time,
Okay.
you will have...
Peradventure, we may have for older generation.
Absolutely.
All right. The program is Healthtitude on ABS Television. At this point, we take a short break. We'll return after now. Do join us again. You're welcome back to Healthtitude. We are talking the new malaria vaccine, a great breakthrough in the health sector, with Dr. Simeon Onyemechi. Now, Doc, while we are beginning this program, from the statistics you gave, it shows malaria had been a great burden in Africa, nay Nigeria. Now, do you think that the introduction of this vaccination is going to reduce the burden, let me put it that way? Do you think?
Well, I don't think I know.
All right.
That,
Tell us.
I mean, for certainty. Remember, there was a time the whole world was shut down. And then, at the moment COVID-19 vaccine came out, you saw initially the AstraZeneca one came out, and over time we had Moderna, we had the Pfizer ones. From that point where we had that selection criteria to give, to the point where we now got to start begging people to come forward to accept COVID-19 vaccination. And immediately that vaccine came, the scientific world became more confident. As public health physicians, we became more confident that, look, let us stop shutting the world. People can actually go out, because the transmission cycle was being cut, and then the most severe forms of the diseases, we were sure that the more people were vaccinated, even when they have COVID-19, most likely they will just have it very mild forms, just like any other flu, and then it will pass. In the same manner, having malaria vaccine today, knowing that we are going to cut transmission in a particular generation, is very instructive. It takes me to my time in Egypt, where they told me clearly, because Egypt has the highest global burden of hepatitis all over the world. And that they traced to the way they did vaccinations in the past. Sometime, according to them, in the 80s, there was a time when there was vaccination, and then when they were still using the glass syringes, and people were not changing needles, they kept vaccinating people, mass vaccination exercises. So almost everybody came down with hepatitis in Egypt. But then, when they started their vaccination program, they successfully did something strategic and cut the transmission, such that when you get to Egypt today, they have the highest burden of hepatitis. Yes, I mean the hepatitis B and C burden, they have the highest globally, but then they have a generation that is free from hepatitis B. So you have a particular population having it, while the aging population having it, while the younger population, they no longer have it. They have successfully used immunization to cut the transmission, and they have this generation that is free
and that's exactly
from hepatitis.
What's going to happen.
That's exactly what is going to happen. So we are starting with this age group, 6 months to 36 months. Then we target these guys, and it's a generation that will form a cohort that will move, at least for now, before vaccine penetration will increase, before the coverage will increase, and then the more we have it, just like with COVID, I said, we started with AstraZeneca. Now we had one that came out in Ghana, the first one they tried out. Now we have the Oxford one, that is the R21, which Nigeria is licensing for us to use here. Now, several other companies will come in. FitSyn is marketing the one in Nigeria. Several other companies will come in when patency rights and what have you become a bit loose. And then the more you have this vaccine penetrating the markets, you now have more people. But if we do it a targeted approach like we are doing now, take the age ranges, then you have a malaria-free generation, such that in those individuals, even when a female Anopheles mosquito bites them for a blood meal, the blood it will feed on, the blood meal, will not contain plasmodium. So when plasmodium is not in that blood meal, that the female Anopheles mosquito will take from these children, these children that will be vaccinated.
The group that will be
yes,
vaccinated.
the group that will be vaccinated. Okay. You now have that even if that mosquito bites you and I to inoculate, what it will inoculate will not include Plasmodium. So once we can successfully target a particular age group, we'll begin to cut the transmission. And because the cycle is clear to us that female Anopheles mosquito bites somebody who is infected with malaria, picks the Plasmodium, bites another person, transmits it, you know, after the breeding sites and what have you. Let's not get into the life cycle of it. Yeah. But once you have succeeded in a particular age group to have a generation or a cohort that is free from it, over time, herd immunity will happen. And then these female Anopheles mosquitoes, when they bite, will just take sterile blood, so to speak. Not sterile blood in the sense of sterile, but with regards Plasmodium for malaria causation, you have a sterile meal from them, and then we are good to go over time. Yeah.
All right, we are on to Healthtitude on ABS television, talking about the new malaria vaccine, which we are looking at as a great breakthrough in the health sector with Dr. Simeon Onyemechi. Another short break. We'll be right back. All right, you're welcome back to Healthtitude on ABS television with Dr. Simeon Onyemechi talking the new malaria vaccine. Now, the Anambra State government recently is saying that they are going to be one of the first states to start the implementation of this vaccine, you know, in Anambra State. I know that with the approval of the federal government, each state will now do whatever they can to protect their citizens. So how do they plan to do this, and when is it going to begin to take effect in the state?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just like it is with any other vaccine, it is the schedule of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency. So to speak, anything vaccination, immunization program in Nigeria, the National Program on Immunization is domiciled with the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, and ditto through them to the various state primary healthcare development agencies to take care of immunization, whether it's for children or adult vaccination. So where we are at this time, good enough, the Expert Advisory Council, 4-member Expert Advisory Council that worked on this Act 21 for NAFDAC, one member of that council is in Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Oka here, because 4 centers took part in the advisory council. And our very good Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Oka here, is part of it. So where I'm going to is to underscore the fact that Anambra is critical in what is happening with malaria vaccine. So we are ready. The solution government led by Governor Chukwuma Charles Soludo, CFR, is ever ready to take the lead in whatever concerns healthcare. You can see the passion and commitment with which in a very short time 342 healthcare workers were recruited, including over 15 consultants to serve in our state facilities. Just recently, today, the National Emergency Medical Services and Ambulance System was launched in Nigeria, and the first state where that will be starting is in Anambra. And Mr. Governor is on the verge of even recruiting more healthcare workers for the primary healthcare development agency in the state. So that signals the intentionality of what the governor is doing. In the health insurance bit, you see him give free health insurance to commercial transporters and what have you. You see him expanding the health insurance scheme to benefit package to include diseases that impoverish our people. Where I'm going to is to underscore the importance this governor places on healthcare delivery system. So we will definitely, through our Anambra State Primary Health Development Agency, get the vaccines when a schedule is released by the federal government of Nigeria through the agency in charge, which is National Primary Health Development.
Right now.
Once that happens, Anambra is ready to key in. And we
All right.
have all of the structures, the code room, the code stores, the geostyle boxes and what have you to maintain code chain or whatever format that is to be required. Remember the same thing with COVID. We were in the first cohort of states that got access to COVID-19 vaccines. The same will happen here.
All right, as we are wrapping up the program, now we know that malaria has been the bedrock of most diseases in our society. And how do you see the health sector, in the next, with the approval of this vaccine, where do you see the health of our people in the next 2-3 years?
Okay, thank you. 2 years, too short. That's for outcome. Well, I speak as a public health physician, not as a clinician now. If you use the logic model, you have that when you start any program, there are inputs, then you have the activities or processes, and then you now have your output, and then you have outcome, and then the impact ultimately, which is where our end goal is, which you begin to see 3 years to 5 years and upwards of that. When you talk about the mortality ratios and all of that, the mortality rates and what have you. So in this instance, we will have that. In the input will include what the State Primary Health Agency will do to get us the vaccines, then the activities happen to vaccinate this age group for a start. And then whenever there is a scale up to happen across the country, we will ensure that our vaccine penetration for malaria, the R21, is high. When we achieve good coverage over time, we now begin to see declining morbidity data. At the first instance, between 1 year to 2 years, on the outcome end of things, we expect that the curve, rather than going up, will start coming down. We're not expecting it to plateau at all. We expect that there will be a steady decline until we get to a point where transmission is effectively cut in the communities. And over time, because the era we have entered into globally now is malaria vaccine elimination program. Okay, that's where the world is today. And Anambra is well on track to key in. And we are very certain that with the infrastructure we have on ground, with the human resource for health, with the telemedicine that is recently deployed to ensure that there's a hub and spoke model to assess care, with the ambulance services, whether boat or land and what have you, we are certain that people will get there. What we need to do is the bit of advocacy and communication and social mobilization to get our people conscientized so that people will not only be aware, but be prepared to access the services. Okay. So that we don't have all of those stories that happened, all of the innuendos and all manner of propaganda that came with COVID-19. Because the potential benefits of any vaccine far outweigh any potential risk that it has.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Simeon Onyemechi, the Managing Director, CEO, Anambra State Health Insurance Scheme. We appreciate your time on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
And that's how it's been. We are going to be malaria-free very soon by the special grace of God and by the approval of the malaria vaccine by the government of Nigeria. And that's it on the program. My name is Nonye Nwokoye. Thanking you so much for being a part of it. Let's do this again some other time. Bye for now.